Greetings, friends, and welcome to our Final Fantasy VII Remake review by your one and only Salty Zera. Without any further ado, let's dive into the first category, and that is, of course, going to be pre-launch anticipation. So, I am probably the biggest Final Fantasy VII fan you're ever going to meet. Like, there's classic WoW, and then there's Dragon Ball, just in general, Dragon Ball, the series, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball, GT, and then Super, of course. Anime, manga, doesn't matter. Huge fan. And then, of course, above that, you've got Final Fantasy VII. And somewhere in between there is Metal Gear Solid. But Final Fantasy VII is my, cream of the crop, creme de la creme. Love it, love it, love it. So, with the anticipation leading up to Final Fantasy VII Remake's launch, I had so many things flashing through my brain. And all I can think is that everything culminated towards the end when we got the trailer reveal of the release date at the Symphonic Reunion in Los Angeles. I was at that event with my brother, and the first time he'd ever been to LA. I've been to LA a couple of times, and it was my first event as a content creator, and this was really before my channel started taking off. And I met so many different content creators. I didn't actually get to speak to them or shake their hands, but there were, people like Maximilian Dude and others that were there at the event, and it just kind of made me feel like, damn, this is cool. And I want to attend other events like that. But when we got the trailer reveal, and then we got the release date, I went nuts. I was like, I knew it was coming sooner than we thought. I'm so excited. And of course, eventually it got postponed, due to, anticipation for the game. They wanted to make sure everything was, spot on and perfect. And, even to this, even now, there's still some bugs in the game that they're still working on. But as of now, no regrets. April 10th was good day for the game to launch. I enjoyed it. But with that, let's get into the actual launch day. So launch day, I did a 24-hour stream. I was well prepared for it. But the thing is that at the end of the day, I sat here and I thought to myself, damn, this is going to be an event like no other. I'm never going to get this again. I'm never going to get Final Fantasy VII Remake 23 years later. I'm never going to get this again. So I wanted to take it in and just kind of enjoy it. So I started the stream a half hour early before launch and just kind of talked it through and kind of hyped myself up a little bit. Here I was 8 years old when this game originally came out in 1997 for the U.S. audience, and I'm just so enamored with it. I fell in love with it. My brother and I played together. It was literally the first title my brother and I played side by side together, beginning to end. And my brother is, of course, 6.5, 7 years older than me, and I love him. He is my brother. You probably won't find any two siblings any closer than two of us. And, when I was a little kid, I looked up to him in everything that I did. I tried to do it just like him. And he's like, hey, little brother, why don't you come play this game with me? I'm like, absolutely. Yes, thank you. And together we were able to beat the game. Together we were able to beat the weapons, Ruby and Emerald, collectively. We were one of the first people, I think, at least in our circle of friends, to do it. And everybody was like, how'd you do it? We're like, well, we tag teamed it, We basically did 24-hour grinds for AP and experience, because my brother would grind for 12 hours, and then he'd go to sleep, and then while he was sleeping, I'd grind for 12 hours. And it was just a never-ending cycle. And I'll never forget that. Some of the best memories of my childhood are from playing Final Fantasy VII. And I carry that over to the stream, and I'm just like, man, I don't know what to expect. I have no idea. And it was such a great event, and I hope to do more events just like it in the future. Initial reactions. Man, oh man, can I even remotely put into words how I feel about this game when I initially played it? No, I don't think I can. I think at least I know of 6 separate times, and I'll get into more of this in a minute, but there was at least 6 times where I literally got choked up. I get choked up, tears going down my face. I had to cover my mouth and my nose so I didn't bawl right here in the microphone on stream. But man, there were some moments. There were some moments where I was completely blown away. I was like, whoa, was not expecting that. And honestly, most of it came not from the combat system, which was flawless, not from the weapon system, which again was flawless, or the materia system, which has always been amazing, but the direction the story went blew me away in a lot of cases, and character development and voice acting. Probably the number one most knee-jerking thing here and pulling at your heartstrings is that, and like I said, we'll get to that in a little bit. As far as initial reactions, this is where the rating system's going to start. With initial reactions, man, I gotta give this game a 9 out of 10. They nailed it. 9 out of 10. I couldn't have been happier with it. Moving on to the combat system and the tactics involved with this game. You know, I've never played a live-action RPG. The closest thing I had to a live-action RPG would probably be the small little experience I had with 10-2. I think 10-2 is when they first started really dabbing with live-action a little bit. But even then, I think there's still a turn-based, like, implementation of that. But, you know, because Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy VII all had turn-based systems. And, you know, each character got their chance. And in the case of Final Fantasy X, you can actually see who was getting a turn when and manipulate combat to your advantage. You didn't really get that advantage in other Final Fantasy games that I can remember, at least prior to that anyway. But 7 was just old school, you know, turn-based. Everybody got their turn. In some cases, if you were fast enough and you were able to slow or mitigate the boss's, you know, ability to make a move, you could probably get multiple turns in before the boss could get one. Boy, that is not the case here. Boy, you were all over the map on this game. There are some fights where you literally have to swap characters like every 2 seconds. Like, it's like, do a command, swap. Now, there are cases where you can actually go into the menu, slow down the combat, but you don't stop combat. Combat does not stop. Combat is just slow. Really slow, but it doesn't stop. So you still gotta make your decisions, and in some cases, you gotta make them quick. Now, that's why they give you access to things like the quick menu and all that other stuff in combat. So, as far as implementation of the combat system, being able to swap characters in and out, and, you know, combat different entities and different enemies all at once. Sometimes you're fighting one mob, sometimes you're fighting 2, sometimes you're fighting 3. And in some cases, you're fighting like upwards of like 12 or 14 different mobs at the same time. You're like, oh my God, what is going on? Like, there's so much going on the screen right now. And yet, that's the beauty of the combat system. In its simplicity, there is a complexity to it that is so lovable and so adorable that, and not just that, but it is so intoxicatingly, like, it grabs you and it will not let you go. And I can tell you right now, there are a lot of fights that I go back in the simulator, or I go back into, you know, is it Chumley, Chadley's, Chamley's, whatever the dude's name is, Chanley, I think his name's Chanley. And you just redo like fights with Bahamut and Shiva and Fat Chocobo, and there's another one, I can't remember what it is. But anyway, there's so many different fights you can do, and I just like doing them again and again and again because I like figuring out the rhythm and the movement and how to combat and how to counter these, you know, these fights. And they're just a lot of fun to figure out. I enjoy it. Flawless combat system. Love it to death. Perfect 10 out of 10 here. Let's talk about the magic and materia system. So materia was carried over from the original, which was good because I was going to disown Square if they'd gotten rid of it or if they tweaked it. Now, we don't get the exact same materia from the original. There is a lot of materia that is new, and there is some materia that is similar in its functionality, but a little bit different and limited in some ways. For example, all materia in the original is probably the most underrated piece of materia you use in the original. It's so in abundance. They're all over the place. Literally, by the time you get to Shinra headquarters, I think you've got like 3 or 4 all materias. Like, it's ridiculous how many all materias you can find. There's one you find in Sector 7 slums. I believe there is another one that you find in Shinra HQ. And I think there's at least 1 or 2 more between the time you leave Sector 7 initially and get to the Shinra headquarters. Basically, you're walking around with 3 or 4 alls by the time you leave Shinra HQ, and it's ridiculous. Well, in this version of the game, in Final Fantasy VII Remake, there are no duplicates. You get one magnify materia, and that's it. You get a single magnify materia, and you better make dang good use of it. And you have to pick and choose when to do that. Same thing with the warding materia. You don't really have access to, I believe it's added effect materia in the original. You don't have access to that until you get to the GI cave, in Cosmo Canyon, which is much later after Midgard. But in this version, you get 2 of them. But it takes a boatload of AP to level them up to be mastered, which is basically where you want them, because you want to be a flat immune to status ailments. And they limit you on the number of materia slots you can have too. You can't have no 8 materia slots on weapons and armor both. Like at the most, you're going to get 4 on your armor, and you're going to get at most 6 on your weapon. So you're limited in what you can do, which is great because it forces you to make a decision, which I love about this. So materia system is probably, a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this, materia is probably the greatest system in any Final Fantasy game ever, period. End of discussion. No challenge there. And the thing is that you carry over a majority of the material from the original, but then you add a little bit of restrictions. And again, the complexity is in its simplicity. Flawless execution here with the materia system. Love it, love it, love it. Solid 10 out of 10 here for me as well. Let's move on to the weapon system. Weapons in this game are similar to Final Fantasy IX, actually, where you can actually obtain a skill from a weapon, but you have to wear that weapon long enough for you to be able to learn it. And it's actually not too different from Final Fantasy VIII in the sense that weapons would grant you access to different limit breaks for certain characters. Like, for example, Wall, you had to equip certain weapons to be able to access different limit breaks. And the better weapons you got unlock better limit breaks, where in this case, different weapons will offer you access to different skills, and you had to use that skill in combat enough times for you to actually learn that skill, and then you could go back to whatever weapon you wanted to use in the first place, and you could carry that skill proficiency and skill ability over with you to that older weapon, which I thought was great. And the best thing about it is that just because you get a weapon early does not mean in any way whatsoever that weapon's not going to be just as powerful and just as useful to you later in the story. Matter of fact, I found myself going back to the Gatling gun and going back to the Buster Sword during my playthrough at the very end of the game. I thought that was really, really cool. I love how they did that. Made you be able to make decisions and still be able to wear the old school weapons if you wanted to, and you weren't really punished for it. It really just depended on what you were going for stat-wise, because weapons also carry with them stat weights, which is, again, flawless execution of the system. I'm going to give this one a solid 10 out of 10 yet again. They're on a roll right now. But this is where, unfortunately, we got to take a step back, at least in one regard. Story, I thought the story was just better than I possibly could have imagined. However, the pacing is where they lose me a little bit. So the story, as you might imagine, is not exactly how it played out in the original from 23 years ago. The original one plays out quite a bit differently. For example, just a couple of examples here. But before I take a step further, spoiler alert, if you haven't played or you don't want to know, stop the video right here, because we're going to talk about nothing but spoilers from this point forward. Aerith in this version is much more aware of her powers as an ancient and etc. than she ever was in the original. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if that's just because of the fact that we're able to interact with Aerith differently. We're actually able to see her expressions, hear her voice, and actually have in-depth conversations with her, or if that was purposely done by Square because they want you to understand that this time things are different. Not just in how things unfold, but also in how the characters themselves interact with each other. That is impressive, how they were able to do that and not really give you a definitive answer. But here's where the story really deviates. At the very end of the game, of course, you run into these spirits, these whisperers, arbiters of fate, Red 13 calls them. By the way, badass name, love that name. And they are purposely there to prevent you from changing the course of history and keep you on a linear path, which sucks which really sucks. You hate that as a person who wants to play the game and experience the game to its full extent. However, what they offer at the end is an explanation that blew my socks off. At the end, you fight the Arbiter of Fate, which is this massive, giant representation of the Whispers. And in front of you, at its feet, are 3 entities from the future. If you actually use the assessment material, I'll actually tell you this. And one of them is carrying a sword, one of them a gun, and one of them is barehanded. So you're wondering, what the hell? What is this? Coming to find out, of course, IGN's got a theory on this, and I tend to agree with it. These are future entities from an alternative timeline that are coming, that the Arbiters of Fate are basically bringing to your timeline to prevent you from changing the events of history. Whoa. You want to talk about a big gulp of WTF? But let me tell you something. They nail it. I mean, they absolutely nail it. You see flashbacks, you see flash forwards, stories are changing. Zack somehow survives the initial, the encounter with the Shinra soldiers, where he actually dies from his wounds in Crisis Core at the end. Like, everything that you expect to happen doesn't happen. It goes completely wonky. And yet the story somehow ends in the exact same spot that the original does, within outside Midgar, making the decision to pursue Sephiroth. And from that point forward, we really have no idea what direction the story is going to take in future installments, because they've literally given us a clean slate. So for the story here, I'm going to give them a solid 9 out of 10, because the thing is that not flawless, because there are a couple places where you're kind of like raising an eyebrow, but by the end of it, and it comes full circle, you're like, oh, now I see why you chose to do that. But in the moment when you're like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. When you get to the end, it makes total sense. So 9 out of 10 here. They would get a perfect 10 out of 10 if it didn't require, exposition at the end, towards the very end of the game, to finally explain everything to you. But you know what? I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here, because they had a tall order here to satisfy people of the old school game and also people of the modern live RPG genre. They nailed it. 9 out of 10 here for the story. As for the pacing, oh boy. Okay, so pacing here. Let's talk about pacing. Pacing in the side quests. They're gonna get a little bit of a step back here. I'm gonna give this a 7 out of 10. Before I even talk about it, I'm just gonna give this a 7 out of 10. The side quests here and the pacing, a lot of the side quests are good. They're fun. You got stuff in the Coliseum. You got stuff involving, some really tough fights. And then you've got some really cool puzzles and games like the Whack-A-Box. A lot of cool stuff. The dartboard game I thought was kind of fun. But the fact that, you don't really get a choice. You don't know how the story's going to unfold until you do these side quests. And then when you do them, you're like, really? That's all I got? I got a potion for this? But then, you don't know that further down the line, that's going to unlock another side quest in another chapter, 3 or 4 chapters down the road. And you're like, well, it would have been nice to know. I mean, I understand you need to have some, air of mystery and intrigue, but you have to actually go in and figure these things out. But I also don't want to spend 3.5, 4 hours stuck in the same chapter when in that same time frame I could have played through the story 3 or 4 chapters ahead and actually enjoyed the story and seen it develop firsthand. So, I don't know. Maybe figure out in the future installment Square, figure out a way to have the side quests actually be part of the chapter itself. Don't make the chapters drag out because you need to pad it for length. Figure out a way to make the side quests actually be part of the story and have things unfold naturally and organically and not just kind of force it down our throats. It felt kind of forced in a lot of places. Like I said, good chunk of them felt good. They were in a good spot. Felt organic. Had good rewards. I felt nice about doing them. And then there was the other, I don't know, half or 1/3 of them. I was just kind of like, really? Really? This is dumb. Why am I doing this? So, 7 out of 10 here for pacing and side quests. Might want to figure out a better way to do those in the future, but otherwise, you know, that's your only black mark on this. 7 out of 10, that's your lowest score. That's pretty good. Finally, let's talk about replayability and final verdict. So replayability on this is just amazing. The fact that you can take any chapter you want on any level of difficulty that you want. If you just want to experience the story, or you're not really sure about what was said here or what was said there, or you want to re-experience another cutscene or this, that, or the other, you can actually pick whatever chapter you want and play through it. And a chapter doesn't take long, especially if you're just playing that one chapter and that's all you're interested in. You can play a single chapter in just under 2 hours. I mean, it's just a quick little sit down. You know, a lot of people who are adults, they don't get more than maybe, you know, an hour to 90 minutes at a time to play a game because they've got kids, they've got jobs, they've got lives they got to live. So, you know, a quick 90-minute, 2-hour session once or twice a week may be all they get. And it's a great opportunity for you to just sit down and enjoy the story. And maybe, you know, and that's if you're like listening to all the dialogue, you're watching all the cutscenes. Like if you're just trying to, you know, get through something to a certain position in the chapter where you have to make a decision to affect future chapters so you can play that chapter all the way through, you can blitz through a chapter in like 30 minutes. Seriously. There are chapters you can do in like 30 minutes flat, and you're like, oh, wow, that's cool. Especially, you know, if you're max level and you've got all your materia maxed out, you can quite literally just obliterate every chapter in this game, you know, in about 25 minutes flat probably. If you just push yourself really, really hard and you just skipped all the dialogue, skipped all the cutscenes, it would not take you long at all. It's pretty ridiculous how overpowered you get if you've got, you know, all the final achievements knocked out and you've got all the accessories plus the one that gives you like you're guaranteed a limit break at the start of every single encounter. It's ridiculous. But replayability here is spot on. I gotta give them a good like 9 out of 10 here, and I'm only knocking a point off because when you select a chapter, like say for example chapter 14, which depends on choices you made back in chapter 9, in order for you to get chapter 14 to unfold a certain way or to unlock certain achievements, you have to go back to chapter 9 and play through chapter 9 to make those decisions in a certain order. So you can go back to chapter 14 and do that. That's the only knock against this. Square just maybe figure out a way to make it to where things flow a little bit better, or maybe allow me the access to make those decisions. You know, if I select chapter 14, say, hey, here are some decisions that, you know, allowed you to, you know, take, you know, things unfold differently in chapter 14 based on the decisions that were made in prior chapters. Here's a list of the options for those questions, those options. Make those choices real fast, and then we'll load up chapter 14 for you. That way, you don't have to go back all the way to chapter 9 to unlock, you know, certain things in chapter 14, and vice versa. Chapter 14 being the wall market, or excuse me, chapter 9 being the wall market scene. If you want to have the dresses in chapter 9, you have to go all the way back to like chapter 3 or 4, whatever it is, to unlock. No, 2 or I think it's chapter 3. You have to unlock certain dresses for Tifa. You gotta go all the way back to chapter 3 and answer a question. So like, make me be able to answer questions from that chapter 3 when I launch chapter 9, so I don't have to go all the way back to chapter 3 and play through it to that decision. That's where you lose me a little bit. So you got knocked a point there, but otherwise, damn near flawless execution on replayability. Final verdict. Well, if you just did law of averages here, you'd probably realize that, you know, this game's getting a solid 9. This game's getting a 9. 9 out of 10. They nailed it. Every way, form, fashion, sense of the word. Quite literally, did not expect this. I was expecting a true blue remake where it was high fidelity graphics, amazing voice acting, and just everything else on top of that. And oh my god, how could I miss the voice acting? Oh my god, I completely skipped that. So let's talk about voice acting real quick before I wrap this up. Voice acting gets an 11 out of 10. Character development, voice acting. Oh my god, Brianna White is probably my new favorite voice actress. She absolutely nails Aerith. Like, she is not playing a role. As far as I'm concerned, that is Aerith. I'm sorry, that is Aerith. And I can say the same thing about Tifa. Hell, I could say the same thing about all of them. But there's something about Aerith's voice that Brianna White just nails. And I'm just like, when I literally, like, I'm gonna show you guys a reaction from the stream, and you're gonna think I'm nuts. You see that? You see that reaction? I literally almost wept right as soon as I saw Aerith for the first time. Which is weird because I saw her in trailers. I saw her in other, like, media. And yet, when I see it for the first time, when I'm in the story, when I'm invested in these characters, and I see her, and I know what's coming. I know what's coming in the future. You know, well, at least I did know. Now I don't have a clue. But from what I know about the original, I want to weep. Because damn, that is Aerith, bro. That is Aerith. In character, in voice, in how she moves, and how she interacts. Blah! And then there's Cloud and Barrett and how their relationship unfolds from being jerks to each other and kind of douchebags to one another to all of a sudden they're watching each other backs. I mean, you can, not just in cutscenes, but I'm also talking like in the midst of combat, how they talk to each other in combat. They're like, they go from being jerks to each other to like, you know, Cloud's like, don't worry about it. I got this. You're not gonna be able to help me. To, oh my God, hey, watch my back. Hey, do this. Hey, help me out here. Like, it's awesome how it transitions, not just in the cutscenes or in the cinematics, but also in the midst of fighting itself, in the midst of combat. Dialogue is spot on amazing. And the bromance between Red 13 and Barrett is just, you don't get to see much of Red 13 boy, but you can tell that bromance is going to be awesome. I cannot wait to see that unfold in future installments. Absolutely can't wait. And Tifa, her relationship with Cloud is so deep. You can see her struggling internally because she knows things about Cloud that aren't true, that Cloud thinks are true, and vice versa. And it's like, man, they nailed it. I mean, Cloud, Barrett, Tifa, Aerith, Red 13, Sephiroth, Rufus. Oh my God, Rufus. President Rufus. The Turks, I love them. Reno, Rude, Sung, just flawless execution on their part. The relationship between Reno and Rude, spot on. Sung being their boss and being all business, you know, telling them, you know, you can't afford to have a conscience, and by doing this, performing this act to, you know, spare someone else's conscience, like, they're all business. That's exactly how the Turks are. And Reno's a pompous ass, and Rude's all business. He's like super like tidy business. Pulls out the second pair of sunglasses. Dude, I lost it on stream, dude. I was like, he about to pull out a second pair of sunglasses. Dude about to pull out a second pair of sunglasses. Motherfucker just pulled out a second pair of sunglasses. Rufus, though, if there's any character whose redesign I absolutely fell in love with, Rufus. First time I saw Rufus, and he just kind of looks at Cloud and he says, "You're a soldier, huh?" Which would mean that I own you. I'm just like, what? Dude, Rufus is one bad mother flower. Dude. Man, that's one bad dude, man. That's one bad dude. But the last thing I do want to mention is graphics. I didn't mention graphics, but it goes without saying. The graphics are supremely just head and shoulders above anything I've ever seen. Even on a PC. Like, this game's graphics, 10 out of 10. Character development, voice acting, it's all been said. Best thing about this game is the voice acting and character development. A solid 11 out of 10 there. Like, abundantly, overflowingly, final verdict is a 9 out of 10. This game does have a couple of missteps, but I don't think there are missteps that could have been avoided. I think the areas that they nailed it were the areas they needed to nail it, and the places where they kind of might have misfired are places where you can forgive them, because they're things that you can probably just bypass altogether, because once you do get around to where you've unlocked everything, side quest and all that other nonsense, that has a finite length to it. You're going to get past it, you're going to beat it, you're going to figure it all out, you're going to get all this stuff unlocked, and at that point, you just do whatever the hell you want. You can play it however you want, whenever you want, at whatever pace you want, whatever rate you want, whatever chapters you want to play through again. So at the end of the day, this is probably going to be in contention for Game of the Year. Like, not even close. Last of Us 2 is yet to be released, so we'll see how that one plays out. Naughty Dog really does a great job with their games, so we'll see how Final Fantasy VII Remake compares to that when the time comes. With that, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review. I love you guys as always. I know this is not something that you guys are used to on this channel, but expect that we start branching out a little bit. Classic WoW is still going to be our typical Tuesday video, and not just Classic WoW, but also Shadowlands Alpha once I get access to it. Hunters are looking really good there, so be looking forward to all kinds of content on things, all things that I love and enjoy and just want to share with you guys. As always, I love you, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Zera out.